We are continuing on with our NHL offseason plan series, and today we're looking at the 10th best team from the regular season and your Stanley Cup finalists, the Dallas Stars. What moves do we expect from them this offseason? We'll discuss that coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. Now, in case you're new to this series, we're doing a dedicated video for all 31 teams to take a look at what their offseason is likely going to look like, what we expect for trades or signings, etc. from these teams as they prepare for next year. Now, of course, we skipped over the Dallas Stars because we're already up to the 6th and 7th ranked teams that have already been completed in this series. Dallas was the number 10 team from the regular season, but I decided to wait until their Stanley Cup final versus the Tampa Bay Lightning was finished so I could kind of indicate here, obviously, how that went and give a better indication on what they might need to do going forward, whether or not they were champions or runners-up here. So let's take a look now at the 1920 season recap for the Dallas Stars. Then we're going to jump into taking a look at their cap space and what contracts are expiring and what we expect from them moving forward. So the Dallas Stars finished with a record of 37, 24, and 8 for 82 points. Of course, as I mentioned, they are your Stanley Cup finalist, runners-up to the champion Tampa Bay Lightning. So, of course, regular season, they had some ups and downs, but overall, pretty solid regular season. Came into the bubble for the 2014 playoff format. Did relatively well in the early stages, of course. Won all their series right up until the final, where they lost in 6 games to Tampa Bay. So, unfortunately, they came so close to winning the Stanley Cup, but just a little bit too far away. Now, let's take a look at their regular season statistics as well. They scored 180 goals while giving up 177 for a +3. The goals against are certainly pretty good. They could certainly stand to be more offensive, which we did see in the playoffs, and we'll discuss that further. But their regular season goals could certainly stand to improve. Special teams were relatively decent, but only average in most cases. Power play was 21.1% for 13th best, so pretty good there. Penalty kill was a little bit lower, 17th best at 79.7%. So as I mentioned, the Dallas Stars were certainly a lot more offensive during the playoffs than they were during the regular season. So we'll have to see here and discuss how they can take what we saw in the playoffs and bring it into next year's regular season. But before we get into what moves they're going to make, let's first take a look at their cap space as well as any expiring contracts. So who are the restricted and unrestricted free agents for the Dallas Stars heading into 2020 offseason? As of right now, the Dallas Stars have $15.5 million in salary cap space. They have 16 players under contract for next season. So we're looking at signing somewhere around 6 to 7 players with that money. So they don't have a ton of players on expiring contracts, but the ones they do are going to be interesting. And that cap space, even though it might seem like a lot right now, could certainly go very quickly, and they could run into trouble retaining all of their players. So now let's take a look at who is expiring, who's restricted and unrestricted as we head into the full swing of the 2020 NHL offseason. Now, the Dallas Stars have some important players in both of these categories. Looking at the RFAs first, they have 3, and they all are players who certainly have proven their worth and have their roles increased here in the last couple of years with the Stars. You've got Radek Faksa, you got Roope Hintz, and Denis Gurianov. I mean, all 3 of those players have certainly climbed their way up into being regular players and then taking on bigger roles within the team over the last few seasons. I mean, Roope Hintz alone has probably had the biggest offensive impact on the longer stretch, whereas Gurianov really come on this year, scored 20 goals in the regular season, had a great playoff. Fax is a pretty solid two-way player. They're pretty important pieces. I do fully expect Dallas to certainly want to sign all of them, no doubt about that, as whether or not to be qualified. Just a matter of how much money they're going to take up. I would probably suggest that we won't necessarily see anything go too long-term, that it could even be a scenario where Jim Nill works out bridge deals for all 3. Clearly, they're all kind of in situations where they're still developing. They could do a shorter-term contract where they're still an RFA in a couple of years. I'm not sure exactly what they're going to do, but no matter what the contract works out to be, all 3 will be back with the Stars next year. Now, looking at their unrestricted free agents, of course, they have Corey Perry, who was a veteran that was come in along with Joel Pavelski, and Pavelski and Perry both played huge roles in the playoffs, even though you could make an argument that Corey Perry's regular season was a lot, less to be desired here. It wasn't really all that solid. We saw some moments during the season where you couldn't wonder, but maybe this wasn't a good idea. But then he came to be the old Corey Perry, showed up in the playoffs, and I would not be shocked if Dallas wants to bring him back on another short-term contract. Now, after how he played in the playoffs, he might be looking for more term. I don't know what the appetite is for Dallas to go more than a year on him based on his regular season play. So hopefully, they'll negotiate that out. But I wouldn't be surprised if they want to bring him back, and I wouldn't be surprised if he has interest to return. You also have Matthias Janmark, Andrei Sekera, and of course, the story of the playoffs for Dallas, Anton Khudobin, who played so amazing for Dallas. I mean, he's been a guy who's been pretty much, you could call him a career backup, although the last 2 or 3 years between his 2 seasons in Dallas and even the year before that with Boston, the starting goaltender he was paired with, whether it be Bishop or Rask before that, both ran into a lot of injuries while he was there, so he certainly played probably more than an average backup. So we already knew he was capable of having a little bit bigger workload than your average backup who you might not want to give more than 20 to 25 games to, where he's been playing 30 to 40 games the last few years. So you knew that capability was there. He seems to be getting better with age as well. So clearly Khudobin was a standout for the Stars. We saw reports today from Pierre LeBrun of TSN indicating that the Stars have already reached out to his camp, indicating that they do want him back. So the only problem is what is it going to cost? After that playoff run, his number just went way up, and he might be more interested now in being a starting goaltender. I'm not sure how he's feeling, how his age is feeling, but he's going to be more expensive than he was previously. Although looking at the other RFAs, when it comes to Janmark and Sekera, wouldn't be shocked if they leave, and I wouldn't be shocked if they came back either. I mean, if you look at the back end, I don't know what the long-term health implications are for Stephen Johns, so that might impact whether or not Sekera comes back. So, they're not pieces that are integral, but they're nice complementary pieces, and I think they'll explore bringing them back, but there's certainly some question marks on whether or not they do return or not. Now let's dive into what we call the most top burning questions for the Dallas Stars as they approach the 2020 NHL offseason. Now, as I mentioned here, we have a goaltending situation like we do with many teams. As I've talked about several times, we're going to see a pretty active and crazy goaltending carousel with many NHL goalies likely changing teams in different capacities, whether it be through trade or through free agency. And the Dallas Stars could very well be one of those teams as well. I mean, they already have Ben Bishop under contract for another 3 seasons at a pretty affordable contract of $4.9 million. His actual salary is less than that, around $3.5 million. So from an actual cash payout standpoint, it's certainly pretty manageable, and his cap hit isn't terrible either. So as much as he's been hurt a lot, he's also been very good. So you have to wonder what his future holds. Of course, you got Khudobin now, who is a unrestricted free agent, playing the best hockey of his life. Some people may not realize as well, there's very little difference in age between Bishop and Khudobin. Khudobin's 34, Bishop's 33. He's going to be 34 soon enough by the time next season starts, whereas Khudobin will turn 35 probably throughout next season, depending on when exactly it starts. I believe his birthday's in the spring, so he'll be 35 before it's over. So, and they also have Jake Ottinger waiting in the wings, and he did get a little bit of playoff action. Did very well in his brief, limited amount of time. So I can't help but wonder if he's ready for a full-time backup role, at least in the NHL. So what are Dallas going to do? If they're reaching out trying to bring Khudobin back, I can't help but wonder if they would consider trading Ben Bishop. I mean, not to say for sure, but, obviously, you look at the contract, it's affordable. So for a team taking that on, it's not too bad from a cash perspective. It's not bad from a cap hit perspective. I don't know what they're going to do, but they could very well run with Khudobin and Bishop again, keep Ottinger in the minors a little bit longer. Maybe they consider moving him. I mean, at the same time, though, they need a goalie of the future, and Khudobin and Bishop are both, like I said, approaching their mid-30s now. So it probably doesn't make any sense to move Jake Ottinger, but either way, there's going to be movement in the goaltending situation here with the Stars, whether they trade Bishop or maybe they're unsuccessful in landing Khudobin, and maybe they have to go with Bishop and Ottinger. No matter what, I think it's fair to say there will be change, and it's difficult to say at this point exactly who stays and who goes. Obviously, getting their RFAs are certainly a major part of their NHL offseason. Like I said, they have 3 players that are all important to this team between Gurionov, Rupe Hintz, as well as Radifaksa. All 3 of those players are critical to their forward group, and I fully suspect all 3 to get signed, but it's just a matter of how much money do they take up. But the Stars are a team, like I said, with the forwards especially, they need to find that playoff offensive gear that they had, because regular season Dallas Stars last year just could not score nearly enough. You had guys like Jamie Benn, Tyler Seguin, Alex Radulov, even Pavelski, Perry, like all of their numbers really, none of them had a phenomenal year when it comes to offensive stats in the regular season. Many of them were able to find that in the playoffs, Tyler Seguin didn't, but we did learn that he did have a lot of injuries going on, and really, like, he was starting to get better as the playoffs went on, and he was getting a lot of assists, even though he wasn't scoring as much. But Seguin apparently was battling through several, injuries that could have certainly impacted his play for sure. So we'll try not to give him too much grief for his struggles when it comes to goal scoring, especially. But this team also went through a head coaching change earlier this year with Rick Bowness taking over from Jim Montgomery. Of course, that was a really unfortunate set of circumstances there that happened with Montgomery, where they had to release him and let him go. He's since taken care of things, gone through a rehab program, and rehired as an assistant in St. Louis, so that's a good story to hear. But I would dare say, based on everything they accomplished under Rick Bowness, they need to get him as the full-time head coach. I mean, we already heard Jim Nill say that the job is Rick Bowness's for him to decide, basically. So I really hope for their sake that he decides that he wants to continue on as a head coach, because I thought he did an absolutely terrific job in keeping that consistency of him behind the bench. Made a huge difference to this team, especially when it came to playoff time. And as I said, as much as they need to sign those RFA forwards, they also need to take a look at their blue line as well. I mean, they do have some players like Sekera, who's an unrestricted free agent. Hard to say, like I said, if he actually returns or not. At one point earlier this year, he was playing a lesser role as the time went on. He did kind of get some more minutes back, but I mean, obviously you got Heiskanen, you got Klingberg, they're going to take up a lot of your minutes back there. Jamie Alexiak, I thought, was really improved and certainly, taking on a bigger role as well. They do have to wonder about the health of Stephen Johns. Of course, he came all the way back during the regular season. It was a nice story after missing so much time with concussion-like issues. But then he wasn't able to play in the playoffs. So, is he, going to be able to play or not? That's going to certainly impact things on what they decide to do here for Dallas. So they're going to have some holes on the blue line. Of course, they have Roman Polak as well, who didn't come back for the bubble. He went to Europe and stayed there. Did not participate in the 2020 NHL playoffs. So it looks like he's pretty much done with the team as well. So, overall, there is some spots there in the blue line that need to be kind of filled. And obviously, if they have players who can move the puck, it's going to help move that offense as well. But I wouldn't be completely opposed to seeing Jim Nill maybe try some sort of a forward shakeup to try to get another offensive type player in there to try to give things a boost. I'm not suggesting that he's going to trade one of his big players like Ben or Seguin or Radulov or anybody else that's really a significant piece up there, but bringing in another scorer, if they can do it, it's going to prove very, very tricky to do because of their cap constraints. After they sign their 3 RFAs, if they try to sign Hudobin, bring back Corey Perry, there's just not going to be a whole lot of money there. So I don't think we're going to really see anything too significant from Dallas except for maybe some depth pieces outside of trying to take care of their existing roster. But clearly this team is a team that got better as the season went along. They've been all the way to the Stanley Cup final. Can they go back and do it again and have a better chance at winning the Stanley Cup? To be completely honest, I do have some concerns that they're going to be able to do that because of a couple of things. One, can you predict that Anton Hudobin is going to have that kind of performance yet again? I mean, it's certainly something that you could probably make an argument that it should happen, should he give the opportunity. But at the same time, that was the play of a lifetime from him. And this forward group especially, the team overall, but especially in the forwards, they're an older team. Their average age is already over the age of 31. So as this team continues to get older, I think their window is really short, which is why I think Jim Nill will try his best to maybe make some improvements by adding some additional scoring to try to boost this team, because I don't think this team as is going to have a very big window to try to get back to where they are now to try to get a Stanley Cup under the belt here before some of these guys start getting to the latter stages of their careers. So let me know what your thoughts are on the Dallas Stars. What moves do you expect to see from them in the 2020 NHL offseason? And let me know your thoughts if they can get back and contend for another Stanley Cup next year. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments and we'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing and turning on your notifications so you don't miss any future content. And give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you for watching and I'll catch you next time.